Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Tree Week. So glad to have you all with us. It's always great to celebrate trees, and we're going to be talking about caring for a group of trees, the trees in your woodlands today. My name's Billy Thomas. I'm an extension forester at the UK Department of Forestry and Natural Resources, and I'm really excited to be with you all today talking about a subject I get to share with a lot of woodland owners here in the state. And this program is more targeted for those with more than a yard, if you will. So if you've got like a little bit of property, we're going to talk about how we can get some support and help to you to take care of your trees in your woodland. So let's go ahead and get started with today's presentation. Right. So I want to cover a number of topics. First, I want you all to learn a little bit about the values of trees and woodlands here in Kentucky. And it's extensive. It really is. It's impressive once you kind of understand that. Then we'll briefly talk a little bit about woodland succession and shade tolerance. Those are two fundamental concepts when it comes to managing woodlands here in Kentucky. And then I want to go over the steps in the woodland management process. And it is a process. It takes a long time to grow trees. And so the management of those is spread out over a long period of time. Fortunately, you're not always having to do something every day. It's not like being a dairy farmer where you have to be milking the cows every day, but there are opportune times that you want to be out in your woods doing certain practices or having certain practices done. And we'll talk about those throughout this presentation. And I also want to make sure that you all are aware of all the organizations that are out there to support woodland owners here in the state of Kentucky. And it's a big list. There's a lot of groups out there, both private and public organizations, available to support woodland owners in the care and management of their woods. So you'll learn about a lot of those today as well. And then I want to kind of narrow down a little bit toward the end of the presentation, talk about the importance of getting a woodland management plan. So if you're a woodland owner and you have some property and you're interested in caring for that property, a woodland management plan is a critical piece of information or an asset, if you will, that can help guide you in the management and care of your woodland. So we'll talk about that and what that entails and how to go about getting one of those. And then I'll briefly go over a few of the more common woodland and wildlife management practices that we do here in Kentucky, just to kind of demystify a little bit about some of the practices that can be done to enhance our woodlands here in the state. And then finally, I'll wrap up the presentation with talking about how you can access some financial and technical assistance programs for woodland management. And there's a number of those out there. So if you're interested in trying to get somebody to come out and meet with you on your property, perhaps get you signed up for programs that might provide financial assistance and offsetting those management costs, that'll be a session or part of the session you'll really want to pay attention to, because there's some good organizations out there, but we're going to focus on one of the big ones, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, at the end of the presentation. And then I'll save some time if there's some questions from any of you all about caring for your trees or woodlands, and we'll try to address any of those at the end of the presentation. So let's start though first with talking a little bit about the importance of Kentucky's woodlands. If you think about it just from a geographic standpoint, half the state of Kentucky, or nearly half the state of Kentucky, is covered in trees and woodlands, right? That's a lot. Over 12 million acres, to be exact, here in Kentucky of woodlands. So it's a big deal, right? But one of the challenges I often think of is, since we have so many woods, people don't think of them often as being scarce or an issue that we need to be concerned about. And that's not really the case, because our woodlands are important for a lot of reasons. And certainly one of those many people own their woodlands for is wildlife. Without our woodlands, there would not be as much wildlife that we have in the state, that's for sure. Most of our wildlife depends on woodlands at one point or another in their lives, either for food or shelter. So it's an important part of all wildlife here in the state. Also, thinking about some of the ecosystem services that our woodlands provide, whether that's cleaning our water or air, they play a really important role as acting as buffers or filters in our ecological systems to really help keep some of that stuff away from us, right? So they're able to take away some of those pollutants, store them, in the soils and in the trees, and getting those so we're not exposed to them. They're able to grab carbon dioxide out of the air and sequester it in their wood and in their roots. They hold soil in place to minimize erosion. So there's just a lot of benefits that our trees and woodlands provide here in the state. From an economic standpoint, they're extremely important. Our latest economic analysis of the contribution of woodlands in Kentucky indicates a nearly $18 billion economic contribution on an annual basis. Now, that's a total contribution, but with direct contributions of over 13 billion, it's easy to see that woodlands and the forest industry in Kentucky who rely on them are really important. From an employment standpoint, nearly 50,000 people are tied in some capacity to the wind industry here in the state of Kentucky. So it's a big deal in that regard as well. Most of our woodlands are privately owned by families and individuals here in the state of Kentucky. About 78% of all the woodlands in Kentucky are privately owned by families, farmers, individuals, if you will, that are out there. And these woodlands, they're often unfortunately treated as an asset that can just be drawn down in the time of crisis. And they're often not considered the farm asset that they really are. Sometimes they're considered in the way. You can't do other things with them, but I would argue that they really are a farm asset worthy of management. And you shouldn't just treat them as a bank account to be drawn down at each crisis. Instead, we should really be managing those woodlands to make sure that they're healthier and more productive. That will not only help those woodlands, but it'll help you as the owner, it'll help your county, and it'll help our state overall. So there's a lot of threats facing our woodlands. You may have heard of things such as the emerald ash borer, spotted lanternfly. There's a number of insects and other plants, bush honeysuckle, if you will, out there that are threatening our woodlands. And if we don't do something about it, we're not going to have the woodlands that we have today. So these threats must be met, or we're going to lose the woodlands that we have. And finally, we know that if we manage our woodlands in a very active way, very purposeful, we can make them healthier than they currently are and much more productive. And that benefits all of us if we can do that. Every few years, the U.S. Forest Service surveys the woodland owners in the United States. And it's a big process, and it takes about 5 or 6 years to get one of these surveys completed. So the data that you're seeing is from the 2018 iteration of the National Woodland Owner Survey. And this survey allows the Forest Service and many of us to get a snapshot of the owners in various states. And what I'm showing you today is the little fact sheet from the 2018 Kentucky sample. So these were Kentucky woodland owners that completed this survey. They were selected because their property was randomly selected in the state to be one of our permanent inventory plots. And so it just worked out that they were the ones who got their property selected to be part of that permanent inventory. And those people were sent a survey, and these are the results of those responses to that survey. And there's a few things that may or may not catch your attention, but there's certainly a couple of items on there that really jump out to me. Um, One of the things that, again, I mentioned before how much of our woods are privately owned, and you can see there it does list 71%. But one thing I will mention is that this is for ownerships that are greater than 10 acres. So if you include ownerships that are 1 acre or greater, then those numbers change a little bit, and that gets us closer to that 78% I was talking about. But most of our woodland owners are advancing in age. They are 64 years was the average age. A little less than half had a college degree. And a few other things that really jumped out to me. Only 6% had indicated that they had received some type of management advice on caring for their woodlands. And since many of these people are not trained natural resource professionals or foresters, that puts them behind the eight ball a little bit. There's a lot of things that they may not be aware of when it comes to their woods, maybe threats their woods are facing or the potential that their woodlands could be. So that lack of engagement with natural resource professionals limits what people can get out of their woodlands. So that's something that we want to try to encourage woodland owners working with some of these professionals who can help them get the most out of it. The other thing, only 3% indicated they had a management plan for their property. And at the end of this presentation, I'll talk about the importance of that management plan. And only 2% had access cost share programs. So most landowners are unaware, but there are a number of programs out there that will support woodland owners in the care and management or conservation of their woodland resources. And that can come in the form of financial assistance to help you do that. It also can come in the form of technical assistance, kind of teaching you how to get that done. So we are trying to encourage woodland owners here in the state to take a more active role in the management of their woodlands because they're facing those threats that I mentioned before. And if we don't do something about those woodlands are going to be further degraded, and the landowners themselves are going to be further behind the eight ball as far as managing and caring for those woodlands. So we're trying to stem the tide of loss if you can. If we can. All right. Next, I want to talk a little bit about understanding woodland succession and shade tolerance. These are really two fundamental concepts that we utilize in forest management here in Kentucky. And woodland succession basically is the orderly progression of a change in plant species over time in that landscape. So you could imagine if you started at a barren landscape over here on the very far left of the graph I've got, where it's just rocks. And a surface mine is a good example of that, right? Where you just start, after the surface mine's done, you're just left with a barren landscape. There's nothing but rocks basically out there, not really any soil to mention. And over time, though, those rocks and other things break down. Smaller little plants get in there and they start growing. They break down, they add organic matter. And then over time, bigger and bigger plants start establishing, and eventually trees will get established. And if we let that go, certainly here in Kentucky, we will end up with something like this climax forest where we'll have a mixture of tree species that are more or less stable until there's some type of disturbance in that woodlands. And then it'll kind of set it back, as we see in this secondary succession over here. This is when secondary succession occurs when the woodlands are basically set back in their successional stage. So they go to an earlier successional stage. So that means we're going to have different plants and animals coming in. So just understanding that, and you all have probably seen this here in Kentucky. If you took your lawn, for example, or any area here in the state, and you quit mowing it, eventually that's going to turn into a forest, right? You're going to get briars and other things come in there, and then eventually little shrubs and then trees, and eventually those trees will shade out other things. So that's kind of what we're talking about, that orderly succession. And that's an important concept that wildlife biologists, foresters, and other natural resource professionals lean on and use to help us predict what's going to happen in an area, over time. So we have that experience and that knowledge of the plants in these areas and which ones are likely to be successful. Another important concept that we use in woodland management all the time is shade tolerance. And that refers to a plant's ability to grow in various light levels. And you've probably seen examples if you've heard of like the hosta. It's a ornamental type plant that we grow around our homes often, but it has the ability to grow in really dense shade. Other species may not do very well in that shade, right? So there is a tolerance, and trees and all plants basically are on a spectrum, if you will, where some on one end need like full sunlight to be successful, and others can live in lower light conditions. So, foresters, biologists, natural resource professionals understand different trees' shade tolerance and which trees can be successful in different conditions. And then we can lean on that understanding to help implement management practices that move the woodlands in a direction that meets the landowner's objectives. So we basically group our shade tolerances into three groupings, if you will. The first being shade intolerant, and that means these trees are not tolerant of shade at all. They cannot grow in the shade. So if it's shady conditions, they are not going to be successful. And two examples that come to mind quickly are yellow poplar, which is the state tree of Kentucky, and the black locust. So these are two trees that commonly come in after a disturbance. They establish quickly. They can grow rather quickly, but they are intolerant of shade. So once that site gets shade on it, they are not going to be as successful. The next group we think about are kind of shade intermediate. And remember, I mentioned that all of these trees are on this spectrum of shade tolerance. And so you could line up all the trees and they might be in a little different spot from one another in how much shade they can take. So in this middle category, if you will, the shade intermediate, we're talking mainly about our oaks and hickories. Those are two of our big examples. So they like basically a medium light level, if you will, to be established and to be successful. And that can help shade out some of those trees that are intolerant, like the yellow poplar, who might outcompete our oaks and hickories if that's what we're trying to manage for. And then the final group we think of as shade tolerant. And these are tree species that have the ability to grow in very low light conditions. And a few examples include the American beech, eastern hemlock, and the sugar maple. Those are three tree species that can almost grow in the dark. And, that's an exaggeration, but really they can grow at very low light levels. And that gives them an advantage to be able to kind of hang out and survive in very harsh conditions when there's not enough light, where some of our other trees would drop out. So understanding those two fundamental concepts of the way woodlands kind of change over time is really critical to woodland management. And when you work with a natural resource professional, such as a forester or wildlife biologist, they have an understanding of this, and they can use that understanding to make recommendations on what can be done in your woodlands to care for the trees in that woodland. So take advantage of that. All right, I wanted to briefly go over the woodland management process, and it's basically a series of steps, if you will. And sometimes the order can be jostled around a little bit, but more or less, it really starts with the woodland owner's objectives. Here in the United States, we really value private property rights. So, as the owner of the land, you have a lot of discretion in what happens to that land. You are really the ultimate decider on what happens to that land. Certainly, there are some things you can't do, but largely you have a lot of discretion in what you can do. So it really starts with your objectives and what you care about. And I would say if you are an individual and you're managing your land, but you're part of a family, try to reach out and engage that family in those discussions, especially any family members that might take over that property upon your passing. The next step, once you've kind of given a little thought about your property and what you want to do with it, then it's time to reach out to a natural resource professional. And you have to kind of make that first step, right? They're available and they want to work with you. Trust me on this. But they're not necessarily going to come beat on your door and say, "Hey, come, let me help you manage your woods." You're going to have to make that first kind of effort to indicate that you have interest in doing that. And trust me, once you've done that, that's going to open up a floodgate of resources and programs and opportunities to help you take care of your woodlands. But it is on the woodland owner to make that initial request. And then once you've made that request for assistance, hey, I need some help taking care of my property. I don't really know what I have. We do want to manage it for maybe timber and wildlife. Could you all help us? And then that's where that woodland owner meets with that natural resource professional. And you may meet with a couple of them. You may meet with a forester. You may also meet with a wildlife biologist or others that are there to help you care for your property and your woodlands. And you're going to basically meet with them. You're going to share what you want out of that property, and they're going to kind of start talking about developing a plan for your property. And your objectives are going to be the guiding point for that plan, because what these natural resource professionals are trying to do is help you, as the woodland owner, achieve your objectives for your property. And then once they've had that kind of conversation with you and they know what you've got, they're going to develop a management plan for you. And that's going to include a some type of inventory of your property, what you have on your property. Now, they may not be able to measure every single tree, but they're going to give you a good idea of what you have on your property and what you can do with it, and some of the practices that can be done to move it in the right direction. Also, the woodland owners have the ability to work with these natural resources on which programs to sign up for. So you could sign up for a wide variety of programs, and they will let you know what's available in your area. And it can vary where you're at in the state. It also can vary in what you're trying to do on your property. So if you're maybe managing for wildlife, there may be some programs available for you that may not be if you're managing for other reasons. So it's going to vary a little bit, but that natural resource professional will help guide you through that process. And then we're going to start implementing some practices, right? We're going to get in there and start doing some of those practices that were recommended by that natural resource professional. And they're going to show you how to do this. They may demonstrate some of this. They may actually mark the trees or whatever that you're going to do. And they're going to try to help you address whatever's most pressing from a resource concern on your property. And they'll be there to guide you along the way. And then we've got to monitor these practices, right? We've got to make sure that they were effective and we achieved the objectives that we were trying to do. And if for some reason we were off and things didn't work out, we need to readjust and we need to get out there and then we need to correct those things that didn't go as planned. And then in the end, this sets you up really to enjoy your woodlands. And then when conditions change or your objectives change, that's a time that you would want to get in there and update your management plan because it may change the activities that you do on your property. All right. So let's talk about how these objectives starts with you, because it really does. Again, private landowners get to decide what happens on their land for the most part. So think about what that land means to you. I know that land is important to individuals and families. There's no doubt about that. But really, what does that mean? Are you there for the privacy or just to kind of get away from things? Or do you want to be recreating on that property? What do you want to do, right? So think a little bit about that and think about that in partnership with those who are going to use that land or inherit that land. You want to try to engage as many family members as possible in this thought exercise because what we're trying to do is we're trying to create champions for this woodland. And the more you can engage your family members or potential heirs, and throughout this process, the more invested they're going to be in that property. Is what the hope is. So think about what you like. Is it wildlife? Do you need it for income? Are you looking at recreational opportunities? Or again, is it just that aesthetic beauty that's important to you? And all of those are fine. You can seek really any of these in combination as well by working with these natural resource professionals. They can give you some good guidance. And then once we have some well-defined objectives, that's really going to help us direct what practices we do on our property. So again, it starts with the woodland owner and what they want from that property. So think big picture, and think long term, not only for you, but for that property into the future with your family as well. So there's a number of organizations that are available to support woodland owners here in Kentucky. Excuse me, let me go back to that. There are just countless number of organizations that are here, and I've got some of their logos and their names up here on the slide. And many landowners are shocked to discover how much help is out there for them. And so it's always exciting when landowners say, "Billy, I had no idea there was so much support for us to care for our woodlands," and there is. I have us listed up there in the upper left, UK Department of Forestry, but we also have the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. So if you're interested in wildlife on your property, that's the organization that can work with you. We have Kentucky State University, who does a lot of work with small farms, agroforestry, and non-timber forest products. We have local extension offices that are available in every county in Kentucky, and I'll talk about what they can do for you. There's also this industry-backed sustainable forestry initiative that does support some educational outreach for woodland owners here in the state. We have consulting foresters that can kind of work with you one-on-one, much like a real estate agent can. There's the Division of Forestry, who has foresters that can come out and meet with you. We have a Forest Industries Association that works closely with our sawmills and loggers and that wood using industry. We have the Kentucky Natural Resource Conservation Service, and that's one I mentioned before, and we'll wrap up with them at the end of the presentation. And they're the ones who have a lot of financial and technical assistance available to support woodland owners. And also, if you're a woodland owner, I will encourage you to join the Kentucky Woodland Owners Association. It's a group of landowners, private group that is working on behalf of woodland owners here in the state, and it's a great networking opportunity for you. And if you are really engaged in woodland management, you really want to take it serious, there is the Kentucky Tree Farm Committee, and that we have the Kentucky Tree Farm program for those that are really engaged in woodland management and are really trying to do a lot with their property. And it's a way to kind of recognize and support those landowners who are really trying to maximize their property from a woodland and wildlife management perspective. And then there's also at the national level, the National Woodland Owners Association. So point being, there's a lot of groups out there, and I'll spend a few minutes in this presentation talking about a few of these, but just know there's a lot of help out there for you. And if you're ever in doubt, reach out to me, and I'll be happy to try to point you to the appropriate organization to help you. Now, if you're a landowner that has a smaller parcel of or basically less than 10 acres, it does limit what you can do on your property. You may not have the same opportunities available as some folks with bigger properties, and we recognize that. The forestry partners here in Kentucky recognize that. So our unit, UK Forestry Extension, worked very closely with the Kentucky Division of Forestry to develop this series, Small Woods, Big Opportunities. And it's really focused on those properties that are 10 acres or less. Some of the programs that are out there to support woodland owners have that 10-acre threshold as a minimum. So we wanted to make sure that we had resources and information available to support those that had less than that. So we developed these 12 fact sheets, and they address a wide variety of needs. And you can see the list there on your right. And there's just kind of the front page examples of a few of them down in the lower right. And these cover a wide variety of topics, and they also have good reference material if you want to go deeper and get a little more information. So I would encourage you to visit our Small Woods Big Opportunities website if you are a landowner with less than 10 acres, and check out some of these resources that are available, as well as some of the references and additional information that's at the end of each of these fact sheets. So I want to talk a little bit about one of the key partners when it comes to woodland management in the state of Kentucky, and that's the Kentucky Division of Forestry. This is a state agency that's available to work with woodland owners one-on-one. They'll meet with you, and they can discuss your objectives. They can inventory your property. They can identify some challenges that you may have on your property, whether it be invasive plants or other things. They can develop a management plan for you. If you're interested in woodland certification, they can help you navigate that. They can certainly provide you technical assistance on what needs to be done to your woodlands to move them forward. They can help get you signed up for some of those cost share programs that I was talking about, because all these organizations work together to get these practices implemented on the ground. They also maintain a couple of tree seedling nurseries here in the state. So if you're looking for low-cost tree seedlings, this is the place to get them. And they also implement timber harvest inspections. So if there's timber harvest going on, they can come out and inspect those harvests to make sure that they're not doing things that impact water quality. So those inspections are really driven by water quality concerns. And finally, they play a critical role in wildfire suppression here in the state of Kentucky. Without them, we would be struggling with our wildfire situation. They're the lead organization that deals with that. So, and if you're a woodland owner, they also support this forest stewardship program. So this is for landowners that have 10 acres or more, and they can develop this and get you enrolled in these programs. Now, if you have less than 10 acres, the Kentucky Division of Forestry can still work with you, and they can develop perhaps a practice plan for maybe one specific thing you're trying to do, but it would not be this full-scale forest stewardship plan. The other organization I want to mention is the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. They have wildlife biologists spread out across the state that are there and available to work with you. Typically, their threshold is 25 acres. You must own that. But if you do own 25 acres, they can come out and meet with you on your property. If you own less than that, they could still consult with you over the phone or via email as well. They have developed these really nice habitat how-tos, and many of our woodland owners here in Kentucky do manage their woods for wildlife. So if that's important to you, make sure you check those out. There's some good information in there. They can also provide some assistance in managing your pond. And Kentucky State, Kentucky State University has a little bit of information about ponds as well, and we do have a little bit of pond information at UK as well. So that's there. They can help you deal with nuisance wildlife. So if you're a farmer and you have wildlife issues on crop damage, if you will, they can help you navigate that. Or if you're a homeowner and you're dealing with some problem in wildlife, they can help identify potential people that can help you take care of that as well. The other group I want to mention is the Kentucky Association of Consulting Foresters, and this is a private group of businessmen and women here in the state of Kentucky. These are all accredited foresters through the Association of Consulting Foresters, but they largely help their clients on timber sales and marketing. They can help them with timber cruises. They can let you know how much your timber's worth or what a fair market value might be. If you ever run into timber trespass issues where somebody comes and logs trees on your property and you're trying to seek recovery from that, they can help you navigate that process. They're also full-fledged foresters, so they can help you in any aspects of timber management and develop management plans for you and making recommendations on practices to be done as well. I also want to mention the Kentucky Natural Resources Conservation Service. Again, this is the federal USDA agency, but there's one in each state. So this is our Kentucky branch, if you will. And they're there to assist landowners in all kinds of conservation related issues. And for woodland owners, that could be conservation of their woodland resources or wildlife resources or even water resources. So they're there to provide technical assistance. So they have a lot of technical assistance on different practices that can be done. And they work very closely with these other partner organizations that I've already mentioned. Each of them are close partners with NRCS. But it's all based on trying to deliver good science to address pressing resource concerns here in the state of Kentucky. They do provide cost share money, financial incentives, if you will, that are available in many cases. And even if there might be an instance where they don't have financial assistance available, there's a good chance they may have technical assistance available, which can be invaluable in its own right. So again, NRCS is a great organization as far as being able to connect you and get you the financial resources you need to manage your woodlands and help make those connections with those that can do it. I mentioned before, if you are a woodland owner, I strongly encourage you to join the Kentucky Woodland Owners Association. It's an outstanding group of woodland owners here in the state that are working really hard on behalf of all woodland owners, whether you realize it or not. They are busy raising the awareness of just how important our woodlands are and how important management is. They work very closely with all the partner groups I've already mentioned. In addition, they meet with legislators and they will let them know what's important from a forestry standpoint, which could be really important to you as a woodland owner as well. They also provide a lot of direct member services, and that's just, I've got a list there. And I encourage you to visit kwa.net and check them out. Again, it's a great group that is working very hard on your behalf. They do have some membership dues, but I will tell you that none of the people that really are running that organization receive any money from that, right? They are all volunteering their time to the organization. So that just goes to pay for basically the activities of the organization. So again, if you're a woodland owner, please strongly consider joining the Kentucky Woodland Owners Association. And then there is a group that's available to each and every one of you all in your counties, and that's your local county extension office. And they are part of our Kentucky Cooperative Extension Service, and they have access to resource professionals at UK as well as Kentucky State University, so they can tap in to all of those professors and other specialists on a wide variety of topics to help local clientele. And they do a lot of work at the local level as well. They provide many trainings and field days and educational opportunities. So if you are not familiar with your local county extension office, I strongly encourage you to do so. And they can also provide diagnostic assistance. Perhaps or you discover a plant on your property and you're not sure what it is, you can take it into them. And if they don't know what it is, they have resources where they can help find out what's going on with it and maybe what you need to do to deal with it as well. So please get to know your local county extension offices. It's a relationship that will serve you in many ways for many years to come. And then we, our UK Forestry and Natural Resources Extension team, are also part of this extension service, if you will. But we work from the campus level. So there's a number of us that work here in UK Forestry and Natural Resources Extension. And we're basically about one person deep on a wide variety of subject matters. And mine is kind of in the woodland management realm. So I'm always trying to help woodland owners do that. And we do a lot of different activities. We have field days, workshops. We do a variety of trainings, not only for woodland owners, but for natural resource professionals. We put on webinars such as the one you're experiencing right now. We also develop a wide variety of publications. And importantly, we work very closely with our partners to make sure that all of this stuff is integrated. So the things you're learning about set you up to manage your woodlands by working with the appropriate organizations and programs that are available with you. So we are all a closely knit, if you will, group of forestry organizations, and we're all really focused on trying to help woodland owners here in the state. We have also a variety of online resources. So if you've not visited our website, I encourage you to do so. We also do a weekly program, and there will be one tomorrow at 11 from the woods today, every Wednesday at 11. And we cover a wide variety of topics on this show. And we also take user requests. So if there's something you're dealing with in your woodlands, let us know and we may feature it on a future episode. So check us out and please join us on Wednesdays at 11. From the woods today. Again, that's a every week show, and those are all archived as well, so you can get back in there and watch some of those recordings if you're interested, based on the topics that are important to you. So I want to talk briefly about the value of a woodland management plan. It provides such insight into your property. It allows you to make really, really strategic decisions on what you're doing on your property. So I can't stress the importance of it enough. If you're really serious about caring for your woodlands and you want them to be healthy and productive, and you want them to be something better than you have now that you can pass on to future generations, you need to get a woodland management plan. One of the great things about that is it makes you or puts you in connection with all of these natural resource professionals that are out there that have gone to school and trained and have experience in helping others manage their woodlands. They can then bring that to bear on your property and help you get your objectives achieved. I mentioned this is a long-term prospect, right? Trees are a long-term proposition. So we have to have a long-term vision, and this woodland management plan ensures that anything that we're doing in those woodlands is kind of moving us toward our long-term goals and objectives for that property. And this really allows you to kind of maximize your resources. I started the presentation saying that many of our woodlands are out there and they're not treated as the asset, the property or farm asset that they should be. So this map, or I mean, excuse me, this woodland management plan allows you to really optimize your resources and make sure that you're tapping into all that's available to help you get the most out of your woodland. And one of the things that the woodland management plan will do is make these recommendations on different practices. And these practices are going to be driven by what your goals are for your property, but they're also driven by the stage of your woodlands, right? So what you see here is a graphic developed through the White Oak Initiative, and it's some of the common practices that we do in woodlands of various stages. So on the upper left here, you'll see the large saw timber. So certain practices, if you have a mature woodlands, there are certain practices that are ideally suited for that. So you can see some of the ones we mentioned here, the underplanting or enhancing, and that would be adding species that are not present in that overstory so that they'll be there in the future. Mid-story removal is a common one we do to try to get rid of some of the that lower canopy that's shading out perhaps our oaks or other species. But the point is that wherever your objectives are, that's one thing. And then the forester or natural resource professional will also take into consideration the current status of your woodlands, and then they will bring those together to make recommendations that are appropriate to get for your property, but also to move your property toward your objectives. Some of the common practices we do, one is kind of, it ends up being a catch-all because there's just a lot of things that fall under it. And we call this timber or forest stand improvement. And basically, that's getting into the woods and manipulating those woods to move them in the direction that achieves your objectives, right? So that can include getting rid of unwanted plants. It could include invasive plants that are causing problems, or it may include plants that aren't meeting your objectives for your property. So maybe if you're interested in wildlife and these trees don't provide wildlife benefit, then we might be looking at trying to get rid of those and trying to encourage those trees that do provide wildlife benefits. Brush management is another common one, and most of this deals with a lot of our invasive species that we deal with, such as bush honeysuckle, autumn olive, and privet, who can be real boogers in woodland management and cause us a lot of problems. We also can do things because a lot of our woodlands are mature. We don't have a lot of early successional habitat out there. So, one of the things from a wildlife management standpoint is trying to reset those woodlands to that earlier successional habitat stage that I talked about earlier, where we get some of that real flush of growth that's really attractive to certain wildlife species. Prescribed burning is a more, I guess, a newer management practice. Even though we have been doing it for a while, we are just really now here in Kentucky ramping up our understanding and sophistication of prescribed burning. There is a Kentucky Prescribed Fire Council that is basically overseeing prescribed fire in Kentucky. They're training people to be able to implement these fires, these prescribed fires in the state. So if that's something of interest to you, we could talk more, but it's the Kentucky Prescribed Fire Council. I would encourage you to visit with them. I'd mentioned before the NRCS office, and this is just a quick overview of some of the practices that are available to support woodland owners in the care and conservation of their woodlands. So there's a wide variety of practices here, and even within each one of those, you can do a variety of different things. So the point being is there's a lot of support available to you as a woodland owner in the state of Kentucky, and there's programs that can provide money to you to do conservation practices on that property. So please take advantage of these that are available to help you be good stewards of your property. So let's wrap it up a little bit with do a quick little review of that woodland management process. So again, it always starts with your objectives, right? And what we're trying to do is move the woodland to achieve your objectives. Then you're going to reach out to the appropriate assistance organizations, and I mentioned several of those in this presentation. And then you're going to meet with them. So I really strongly encourage you when they are able to schedule time to come out and meet with you, that you do everything you can to actually physically be there and meet with them as well. You really want to try to develop a relationship with that natural resource professional, because hopefully you all are going to be working together, for an extended period, taking care of your woodlands. They will develop a plan for you, and this will be either a practice plan or a forest stewardship plan that kind of has all the information you need to take care of your woodlands, right? And part of that, they will help identify which programs are best suited for your objectives and for your woodland. And then they'll help you start implementing these practices. They may show you how to do some of it. They may mark some of these, whatever you really need. They want to make sure that you are in a good position to take care of this. Now, if you are unable physically to do these practices, they can try to help identify vendors or others that could then implement these practices on your behalf. And then, of course, we have to monitor these practices, right? We need to make sure that what we were trying to do was achieved. And if not, we need to make some adjustments to make sure that we are getting the practices implemented appropriately. And then the end, hopefully this sets you up to really enjoy your woodlands. You'll have the peace of mind knowing that they are being well cared for, that they're being evaluated on an ongoing basis by natural resource professionals, and that you're doing everything you can to make them as healthy and productive as possible. I hope today's presentation has stressed to you just how important our woodlands are, not only for you as that owner, but for society overall. And I appreciate what you're doing today to try to educate yourself on some of the options for your woodland. And if you don't have your family member with you now, please share this knowledge with them. The more people that we have engaged in the management of those woodlands, the more likely that's going to carry forward in time. And please know that we can make our woodlands healthier and more productive by active management. And that's largely because a lot of those threats that are continuously coming to our forests, if we don't do something about them. And I would also encourage you, don't just treat your woods as just an asset that you're going to draw down like you would a bank account. Treat it like a farm asset that's worthy of management and your attention. as you're doing today, educate yourself on the programs and the assistance that's available to you. I went over a variety of them, and I would be happy to speak with any of you all one-on-one on kind of navigating your individual situation. But just know that there's a lot of help available for you. And in the end, I think connecting with other woodland owners that are going through that same process, such as the Kentucky Woodland Owners Association, is just invaluable for woodland owners. You all can speak the same language to one another, and sometimes, you can translate, if you will, what some of the natural resource professionals are saying and really what that means on your property. So that's the presentation that I have for you all today. I cannot thank you all enough for being with me and being interested in caring for your woodlands. And I'm going to go ahead and stop this presentation, but I will stick around for questions from you all. And if you've had some for me in the chat pod, I'll find those here in a second as we get into this. So hopefully that met your needs. Please use the chat function if you have any questions, and I'd be happy to try to talk about anything that's of importance to you. I would also, I'll put in my email or in the chat for everyone my email address, and so you can directly email me if you would prefer, and I would be happy to try to talk to you one-on-one. Thanks, Joseph. Appreciate that. Um, so please, go ahead and click on my email or copy it or whatever, so you have that. Obviously, if you got the email from Renee about this, you registered, so you know how to kind of access us. But we want to be available to support you all, make those connections for you all, so that you can be good stewards of your property. And I'll ask one little favor of you. If you know of another woodland owner out there, please share this information with them, right? We need all the people we can out there being aware of this and taking advantage of all these opportunities so that we can have healthier and more productive woodlands overall. If we have neighbors that are caring for their woodlands, guess what? It's going to make it easier on you to care for your woodlands. So you may not be having to fight the invasive species that are on their property if they're taken care of them. So all right, folks, I thank you so much. I really appreciate you all sticking with me. This has been recorded and it will be available soon as a recording. So I really appreciate you all. And at any point, if you know of anybody that has questions or concerns about managing their woodlands, please send them to me and I'll do my best to get them routed appropriately. And if you yourselves ever have questions, please reach out to me or some other natural resource professional. We want to help you take care of your property however we can. So thank you all very much. And I'm going to end the presentation now. Bye, everyone.